Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to continue our look at painting a BladeGuard Veteran Primaris Marine in the Brazen Claws color scheme. And in this video, we are going to work on his belt, the little leather bits, and some of those other little details going on. To get us started, we're simply going to use some snakebite leather Citadel contrast, applying this fairly generously, but anywhere where it appears to pool up or anything like that, we draw the excess out. You can see I'm simply going around following all the leather bits and the holster, the belt, and I also do the, there's little pouches on his backside that are on his like belt line and everything like that. I do those, but I don't bother showing it because, you know, not entirely necessary. I think you guys get the gist of what I'm up to here. Now, snakebite leather contrast is fantastic. If you're going to try out one particular contrast paint, I would highly recommend snakebite leather. Mortonfang Brown is next with some Lamian medium. We're going to just simply add a drop to it just to thin it out ever so slightly, give us a nice smooth gliding action as we work our way across the surface. Now I'm moving in with Mortonfang Brown. Now it does have a slight warm hue to it. It actually has a bit of like a red hue to it. It's not a perfect match for snakebite leather, but I really wasn't that concerned about that, and really the demonstration with the snakebite leather was simply slapping it on and, you know, pretty much moving forward, kind of like what I've been demonstrating with the rest of the model, kind of just starting off with contrast and then going further with our painting, just to demonstrate, you know, how basically we can, you know, easily accomplish it. Now, with the Mortonfang Brown on there, you can see that we left a lot of the snakebite leather that was darker and everything like that remain in the shadows, and basically that's its job that it fulfilled. We're jumping over to XV88 and we mixed that into the remainder of the Mortonfang Brown, but I also added another dollop of Mortonfang Brown, so it's probably closer to a 2-to-1 or maybe 1.5-to-1 kind of thing. But either way, I was just merely looking for kind of that in-between value for our first highlight. And very carefully, you can see I'm simply applying this along the edges and, you know, kind of going pretty much along the outer perimeter of each of the little details. And it's a bit of a edge highlight, but not so much. I'm also kind of haphazardly stippling some areas just to fill in the color. As I was working my way around, I actually wanted to create a bit more of a leathery texture. So you'll see at points where I'll simply create some dashes and some lines, and that's just to add a little bit of texture to that surface. I also want to create a little bit more weathering closer towards the upper portion of the holster, as I imagine that, you know, as he's unbuckling it and drawing his pistol out, the wear and tear on that leather. And so actually I will get a little bit brighter there. The little canister on his belt, I have no idea what that was. I was actually going to paint that like a glass vial, but apparently it's a leather cylinder pouch thing. I don't know, but either way, we're jumping over to the XV88 again. Or no, it's a Meshy Desert, I think it is. And with this, we're just basically going to begin our highlighting process, continue our highlighting process. And as I work my way through, it is, again, just simply following along. But as a big reminder for everybody out there who is relatively new to a lot of these little ideas of highlights and things of that nature, when we are applying our highlights, we are using less and less paint and occupying less and less space on the models. So to create the illusion of a color gradient, you often will apply less and less brighter and brighter colors along edges to define details. And of course, we can also add little scratches here and there, or continue the theme that we had already laid out initially. But you can see here again, I want to get a little bit brighter up along the edges of the holster here. So the color is going to get a little brighter up towards the handle of the weapon itself. And again, I just want to, you know, create that idea that, you know, the leather is a little bit more chapped and worn around the edges there because he's, you know, he's unbuckling it, drawing it out, and, you know, blasting away with it kind of thing. It's relatively straightforward here. Again, on the belt buckle where the middle clasp comes out, I also highlight that area as well. Xandri Dust is next. We're going to add a dollop of that to our XV88. Not really a one-to-one, but kind of an in-between value again. It's kind of mixing to eye. It's just, leave no paint behind kind of thing. I'm just mixing into the remainders to create my in-between colors. And again, we are using less and less. Now you may notice that I'm also doing a slight stippling along edges. Again, that is to create the illusion of wear and tear on the leather. The leather is obviously a very soft material, especially around a big, strong armored marine such as this fella, that, he probably would be fairly rough with it. And again, it's just simply going along the edges and a slight stippling action. That's basically how you see my brush is going straight in, straight out at the surface to create little dots and dashes. That, to the viewer, gives the impression of texture and weathering, as it were. And again, you can see it's more just really following along the edges. And this is where, obviously when, if you've ever listened to me for any length of time, I talk about, knowing how to apply a nice smooth base coat. This is where that kind of, practice pays off in huge dividends, as it were, because, you are occupying so much area and really you don't have to do too much to the color. Basilicum Gray is next. This is Citadel Contrast, and this is just to kind of block out some of the areas here. Now, initially I was gonna just do a non-metallic metal with just this contrast, but I didn't really feel like going back over any of the areas. You can see there's previous colors on some of the other details here, like the handle of the pistol. You can see there's a little bit of red there. And I just simply cover over with the contrast. And I do 2 layers of contrast on these details. Once that first layer is dry, I come back in and grab another little bit of color. And this is undiluted both times. It's simply just straight out of the brush. I'm just being very, very careful with it. And that's another one of these fun qualities when working with these paints, is that if you're very careful, you can achieve some really wonderful results just simply building up to a particular color. Basically, it gets you used to the concept of glazing and things of that nature, and so that's really where contrast for more of the expert type of painters, that's where it really shines. Next is the Fang with a drop of Lamian Medium. With this, we are going to thin this way down. I'm also going to use a little bit of the dampness of the brush just to thin the color out ever so slightly. And with this, I'm going to do a non-metallic metal, a rough non-metallic metal, more of a stylized type of non-metallic metal. It's not a true kind of, reflective ambient type of metal as what would really be there. This is more of a stylized approach to it. And with this, some of the areas, I end up kind of just blocking in the entirety of the areas. And again, because initially I was going to just do the whole effect with the Basilicum Gray, and then I kind of canned that and decided I'll just come in with the Fang. The reason for using the Fang is simply because I was looking for a darker bluish gray, because I wanted to go for kind of a blue steel. Rust Gray is next. I'm going to add that into the remainder of the paint, add another drop of medium so it's really nice and thin. And with this, I'm going to follow along. Now, when doing non-metallic metal type of effects, the really shorthand version of it is whatever the surface is, build your color brighter downwards towards the base of the model. If you can, if you're paying attention to horizon lines and things like that, that's fine and all, but you end up getting more into like a real kind of a sky earth non-metallic metal, and that's kind of more like a true representation of a non-metallic metal effect on a model. With this, you can see I'm just simply bringing the color brighter downwards on some of the details. I just simply pick them out very carefully, but I also do the upper edges as well, and it's a simple edge on the high points on some of those flatter surfaces, like the end of the handle of the pistol. We're building the color brighter, and you treat each face of the detail separately from each other, and you just basically kind of push the color downwards. We're using rust gray here all on its lonesome with a drop of medium, and we're going to refine these highlights. And again, when we are creating our highlights, we're working smaller and smaller and more carefully. Now this is where using your mediums really will help you out a lot in your control, because water just doesn't have the same viscosity as regular paint does. And when we add a lot of water to a paint, especially if we're working with it in a thinned out fashion like this for glazing, that breaks the surface tension, and the paint will kind of pool up or bubble or do all sorts of weird things, and it doesn't act like a paint. Which is why I highly recommend, if you're going to give this kind of thing a go, that you should have some medium with you so that it can help you maintain control as you apply it. Ultramarine Gray is next with a drop of medium in there, Lamian medium of course. Give it a thorough mix, and then of course with this we are going to be very carefully applying this along the very bottom portion of details, but also on the upper portion at corners and things. And that's just to represent a bit of a shine to these details. Again, this is what gives the impression of a metallic surface, like not quite a polished metallic surface. Again, if we were kind of going for that really reflective type surface, we would push the contrast further, almost to a black in some areas, to a pure white in some areas. Here I'm just going for more of a brushed metal kind of look where, it's reflecting some ambient light, but otherwise, it's not terribly realistic. And in fact, like I said, this is more of a stylized approach to non-metallic metal. On that buckle, I actually kind of go for a highlighting scheme of kind of like the 2 o'clock position and the 8 o'clock position on that buckle where the highlights are building. And I try and catch the upper portion of the buckle and the upper inside portion of that buckle. Next, we're going to jump over to some Black Templar. We're going to use some contrast medium. This is a different medium here for the contrast paints. And we're going to add 2 drops and just a brush full of Black Templar. Give it a thorough mix so that it is really a soft, cloudy kind of look. And then we're going to build up some of those shadows again. We're going to push this contrast just a little bit more. Now this will knock a bit of that blue-gray that the Fang and, the other previous kind of Space Wolfy type colors were in there. But I'm also going to use this to create a bit of black lining around the edges as well. And you can see I'm being very deliberate here. I'm avoiding the really bright portions of those details. I'm merely pushing the shadows back further downwards, kind of, you see like on the handle here, I'm pushing the color in towards the holster, but also on the upper portions of the details. Here you can see on the end of the pistol, you can see I'm pushing the color upwards. And of course, when we are glazing, where we finish our brush stroke, that is where we're going to get the largest deposit of color. So that's one of the other key aspects of glazing as well. Here I jump back over to the remainder of my Ultramarine Gray, and this is just to reestablish some of the bright points. I don't bother with white because Ultramarine Gray is really quite bright as it is. Once this Black Templar is dry, of course, I'm coming back in and applying this around the model, and I'm just reestablishing some of the corners and the high points, and that's really it. Now, again, with non-metallic metal, you build the color brighter down towards the bottom, but you also put on a highlight along the upper portions as well, so that you kind of have these little, each facet has these little gradients of color going on. We're going to jump over to Corn Red next, and this is going to be for the purity seals. I'm just going to use a fairly generous amount of water in the bristles, and with this, I'm simply going to base coat each of those little seals. I don't show the entirety of painting them because I needed to kind of get in close so I could see the edges and the perimeter of each of those little details. We're going to jump back over to Xandri Dust. We're going to slap a little bit onto the palette. Again, I'm only going to use the dampness of the brush just to thin this color down. Now, both of these colors are Citadel base colors, so they are actually quite rich in pigment, and it really only takes just one coat to get a nice, smooth, even coverage. But again, because I have it thinned out ever so slightly, it applies in somewhat of a loose fashion, but that's okay because I just quickly do a quick little layer Jumping over to Wazdaka Red, and this is to highlight the seals. I concentrate just a little bit up in the upper left corner of the inside detail of the seal, kind of at the 11 o'clock position or possibly even the 10 o'clock position. And then I do just a little bit of the perimeter of the seal itself. There is a slight bumpiness to the outer edge, but that's fine. I take a little bit of the Zandri dust, add it to the Wazdaka Red just to create the highlight color. And again, I do the same kind of thing. I just simply do the upper corner of the seal and also just catch just a couple little bumpy areas on the outer perimeter of the seals, just to give the illusion of the highlights on, how it kind of has like that bumpy kind of perimeter to it. So that's really what all the point of that is really. Next, we're going to jump over to some Ushabti bone. We're going to slap a little bit on the palette, just the dampness of the brush to thin the color out ever so slightly. And very carefully here, we are going to highlight the parchment paper of the purity seals. And I'm just basically following the high points. There's little folds and such on the detail itself. And so I just quickly lay some highlight color down. I could have created mixes and things of that nature, but I decided, it's parchment. And, I think we all get the point. Regular old Agrax Earthshade is next. This is going to be applied over the parchment and the seals. Being fairly generous with this application, you can see it's kind of pooling up in some areas. So really quickly, I just dry the brush off and draw the excess out. You can see there's quite a bit of paint remaining in between the parchment papers or parchment seals, or whatever the heck they're called. And I just draw that excess color out just so it's not so dark and, just kind of ham-fisted in there. But we'll set that aside, allow it to dry. And of course, with these areas done, we could write in letters. Maybe we'll cover that in a future video. But that is it. That is the leather on his holster and his little doodad on his belt and his belt itself. And of course, some little non-metallic metal effect in there. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. And stay tuned for the next installment where we'll probably work on, let's work on non-metallic gold. Big thank you to my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. And patrons basically get early access to a lot of the videos. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.